Wisconsin Photography Club PowerPoint.
Yes.
Thank you. So uh, I'm going to go through the announcements quite quickly. So some of you have seen this a few times that I'm stepping down as president end of the month, looking for a replacement, still looking. Probably what I will do is set up a board meeting um, to discuss what happens if no one steps up to take my place. Um, on the other hand, we have good news. Well, let's go. There we go. Good news that uh, since Christy Williams is stepping down as program coordinator, I've been looking for someone to take her place, and Mariann has agreed to take that over, probably working with Terry Butler as well. So, good news. Upcoming programs. 2 weeks, we're going to do a peer review. We've done a couple of these in the past. Disappeared. What happened? Okay. Um, so I've sent out an email to everyone uh, inviting people to submit images to discuss. And so we'll see how that goes. Went really well the last couple of times. Then in April, we have tabletop photography with Peggy Boyk, and then Don Trednick in May. We have a bunch of competitions that are deadlines this month, so I put them on one page. The Interclub competition, which is annual, it's put on by the Camera Council. Uh, Due date is March 9. N4C is, as usual, is the 10th of March, 10th of the month. And then our salon, for the April salon, we have a March 13th deadline, and the topic is close to home. And the last notice is just a reminder that spring break is coming up. Terry Butler is running this. April 5 is the date, and some more details there. Enough of that stuff. Uh, Stop sharing. I think I did, yep. And Mariann, I'm going to make you the host. Give me a
Okay.
second. Give me a second. There we go. So I just made Mariann the host. Mariann Sir is going to be telling us about um, wildflower photography. So looking forward to this. Um, can you,
See. Do I
you need,
share my screen? Is that how I do it?
yeah, you click
Okay.
share and then you pick the PowerPoint or whatever it is you have the,
Yeah, it's a PowerPoint.
okay, this is looking hopeful.
Does that look good?
That looks very good. Spring is coming. Excellent. I'm going to mute and let you take over.
Okay. Um, Yeah, I think I did a program like this, oh, about 5 years ago, for the club. And this is very similar to that, but I've done done a little reorganizing and things on it. So it's just really stepped through the seasons with some of the um, really nice photographic flowers, wildflowers that we get. And it's by no means comprehensive by any means, but just some that I have photographed and enjoy photographing. And we'll give you some ideas of what's out there about what time of year they're there, and some resources that you can plan your trips for looking for things. So I'm just going to get started by, you're going to see, I have a bar across the top that says your screen sharing and stop share. Do people see that, or is it just on my screen? Okay. All right. Well, I hope you're not seeing that.
I can
Um,
see it. Yeah.
you can, you can?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how to get rid of that.
I don't know that you need to, but
Okay. All right, I'll just leave it unless somebody can tell me how to do that to get rid of it. Um, so this you're gonna this is how I put together the flowers that I'm going to talk about, and all of the slides where I talk about the flowers are going to be in this format. And just I'll give the name, a photograph that I've taken, and the date next to it is the day of the month that I took that. Then there'll be a map of its distribution, and all of those maps are taken from the Minnesota Wildflowers.info, a great website, and I'll talk a little more about at the end what else is available
So
from
there's
that
a separate
website.
so there's a separate map for each flower?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
and they've updated some of the maps. You're going to see the blue ones are older. I think the most of the blue ones are from 2016, and they've updated some last year and this year. And those are in green, I guess, just to differentiate. So, and I'll give just a little, I'll give some places where I've seen them and or I've photographed them. Kind just a little bit of kind of the habitat where you would find them and some description of them. So first off, since we are a photography club, everybody wants to know you know, what equipment I use. So camera, of course. Currently, I'm using an R5, but I've used many different Canon cameras throughout the years. 100 millimeter macro lens, a 24 to 105, a 300 2.8 with a 2x Cal teleconverter, a 100 to 500. So, and as I show you some of these images, I'll kind of tell you why I use the lens I did. Of course, the cameras are getting so well stabilized now that you can do a lot of hand holding, but I prefer to use a tripod, mainly because when you're waiting for the sun to change, for insect to land on something, for the wind to stop blowing the flower around, you have a steady base, and you're not trying to hold it in your hand. I use a remote release much of the time. I still use two filters, depending on what's going on. And the one is a polarizing filter, and the other is a split neutral density filter. And I have a example of how I use those a little later. I do use a diffuser and reflector, and on very rare occasions I will use a flash, but I prefer to use natural light rather than a flash because I think a lot of times you can tell that it's a flash. So here is some of my photos in the lens that I took them with. The macro there is for the yellow marsh marigold, and the a 25 millimeter for the large flowered trillium at the bottom, so I could get some of the environment around it. I used a 600 millimeter, that's the 300 with the 2X on it, for the ram's head. And then the reason I ended up using that is because the background was really messy and I just couldn't get it to blur out with anything else. So looked kind of strange. The lens was probably 100 times bigger than that flower, but it worked. And then, a 400 for the past flower there at the top. Orchids some of them have notoriously shiny leaves, and there's a lot of flowers that have shiny leaves. And I find, you can correct some of that post, but I find that you get a much more quality image if you use a polarizer and get rid of a lot of that in that manner. I think flowers are best done on an overcast day. And this is just an example why. On a sunny day, you get a lot of dark shadows, you get a lot of highlights. You don't want to blow out the highlights, so often you get these dark shadows. And so you get a much more even exposure and retain a lot of the detail and vibrancy. If you can shoot in the overcast or if you make it an overcast day, such as this is, on the left is just, I didn't do anything but I didn't do any exposure compensation or anything. I was just kind of seeing if I had a composition that I wanted. Once I decided that, I wanted to take that, then I did exposure compensation for the highlights, so I don't blow the highlights out. And then on the right, I add, so to make my overcast day, I used a diffuser. And so the image on the right is a diffuser. I will also use a reflector in tandem with a diffuser to give some highlights. I didn't on this particular image, but I do on a lot of them. And that's what it looks like when I use my reflectors and diffuser there on the left, and the reflector on the right, and my little sticks that holds the things up. So there may be more elegant ways to do it, but that seems to work for me, and they don't weigh anything. So when I'm carrying them, it's not a big burden. This is an example of, I don't use the split neutral density a lot, but this was a case where it really came in handy. That was a really, really bright sky in the background, and so I used the split neutral density to bring down the exposure on the sky to even it out for these shooting stars. So that's just a little bit about what I use. I have other programs about how to go about doing the photography portion of it, but this is really just more of quick walk through the year and looking at some of the flowers that are available and when they bloom and a little bit about them. The American passflower, well, the very first wildflower to bloom is the skunk cabbage. And it will, depending on the weather, will end of February, but really most of the time it's into March. I have pictures of it. It's not particularly beautiful flower. It's an interesting flower, but it grows in often really wet, muddy areas. I think the one thing fascinating about skunk cabbage is it generates its own heat and will melt the snow around it when it's coming up early in the year. But one of the truly early flowers that is just really fun to photograph is the American passflower. And you can see I've photographed these three from March 27th all the way through April 16th. And then on into April, depending on where I'm going to be, where I'm traveling. And so, all the way through the end of April. I have seen them in May, but generally by May, they've pretty much spent. Unless you're way up north, and you might get them, but I haven't photographed them up in the northwest, so I can't give you on the ground report for that. As you can see, it's they're in the open woods and prairie, any place where there's sandy soil, and pretty much through 2/3 of the state there. And I photographed them at 9 Mile Creek and at 106th Street, down at River Terrace, SNA, and the Crowhawson Park Reserve. And then following on, the March-May timeframe, April-May timeframe, a lot of the spring ephemerals are out. These are the spring flowers that bloom before the trees leaf out. And a true ephemeral is a plant that it'll bloom whenever it blooms, generally in the spring, and leave no trace once it's died back and finished blooming and setting seed. There's no trace on the ground of it anymore. It's underground. But a lot of people, just a lot of the early wildflowers, they call them the spring ephemerals. Bloodroot is always fun. Grows just about everywhere. You can start down in the southeast and follow the blooms up through, the far northwest. So if you miss them down east, you still have a chance to get them. I love the big leaves that wrap around the flower and playing with those. And there's lots of places you can find them. Nurse Strand is good, William O'Brien, Minnesota Valley, Elm Creek Park. Minnesota Landscape Arboretum has a lot of some in their wildflower gardens. I have not done the Butler wildflower garden, but I know a lot of people do, and there's a lot of wildflowers there. I personally don't know what they have. Then here's the jeweled shooting star. As you can see, it's pretty limited in Minnesota down to the southeast corner. I happen to be in Perot State Park in Wisconsin when they were blooming, and that's where I took these mid-May. And I've also seen them in Zembro Falls Wood, SNA. Marsh marigold is another one that covers, you can find in about 3/4 of the state. And, they're in wet areas in the woods, wet ditches and in swampy areas. This is one that I usually use a polarizer on because they have these huge leaves that really, really reflect the light. And so, that's one that I take special care on to control that. But they're a lot of fun. They're very colorful. You might have to get your feet wet on some of them to actually photograph them. But Jay Cook, Nurse Strand, Battle Creek Park, a lot of different places for them. We have a couple hepatica. One is the round lobed, and this one is, you can see the leaf there is rounded. There's 3 lobes of it, and it's rounded, so that's the round lobe. They do come in different colors. They can be these dark. This is probably the least prevalent color, is this really dark purple. But they get lavender and a bluish color and white, and some of them will kind of turn pinkish. Again, all the big woods areas will have these. And then there's the sharp lobe, and you can see that these, if you look at the leaf in the upper right, the really dark leaf that's kind of purplish, you can see they're pointed. And they're not, don't cover the state quite as much. They don't go as far to the northwest. But again, in deciduous woods, about the same time as the round lobed. And they're more just white most of the time. You get some variation, but not as much in color. Then, of course, there's the trout lily. Nurse Strand's a great place for it. Carly State Park, Banning State Park. I generally go down to Nurse Strand, and that year I took this picture was toward the end of April. And they like moist woods. And so these in Nurse Strand, they grow close down by the waterfall, if you know where the waterfall is, and in that area that's right next to the stream. So they're in a really moist area. Now there's also dwarf trout lilies in Nurse Strand, but I don't find them particularly photogenic. They're teeny. They're just super tiny, and you really can't get, at least in Nurse Strand, you can't get very close to them because they're fenced off, because they're very rare. They only grow in a few places in Minnesota in the world. So I console myself with the larger variety. And of course, Virginia bluebells, they're a lot of fun. Like, excuse me. I love when they're buds, they're pink, and when they bloom, they're blue. And so I kind of like doing all of the different colors that you can find. And Carly State Park is a wonderful place. They do have a bluebell festival on Mother's Day, and so I try to go if they're blooming at that time, and they should be. I try to go there before the festival because if it's nice weather, there's so many people and there's a lot of tromping around, and you lose a lot of some of the flowers there. But there's other places right around Carly State Park that you can go to that have a lot of them as well. There's the Zumbro Falls SNA. There's Mayo Woods in Rochester. They're just, you can find them a lot of places. And then, of course, the Trillium are a lot of fun to take. There's several several species of them. This is the large flowered one that's really showy. Again, deciduous woods, and with William O'Brien, it's really good. Banning's really good. Itasca, and you can see they cover a lot of the state. And you can, again, this is one you can just follow north. I mean, their bloom doesn't last that long, but you can, follow them north for a couple weeks at least, while they're still in good shape. We have a number of orchids depending on who you're reading. We have somewhere between 40 and 42 or 3 native orchids in the state. Some of them are very inconspicuous. They can be 2 or 3 inches tall and be all green even when they're blooming. So these are some of the more showy ones. The small white is one of the earlier ones in May and June. I've mostly photographed that at Shaper Prairie, which is a nature conservancy reserve. But I've seen them at these other places as well. And again, they're more on the south and along the western edge of the state. Wild lupin, as opposed to the introduced variety, the non-native variety, hosts the Karner blue butterfly caterpillar. I see I've spelled that wrong. And then the yellow flower interspersed on this is Hoary Puccoon, which is a lot of fun. And it's really nice when you can get them together because they, complementary colors. They're a lot of fun to play with. Sherburne National Wildlife is where I took these particular examples toward the end of May there. And they have a nice stand. Depending, with all wildflowers, it depends on what the weather's doing and whether or not, how big a stand you get. Some of the orchids only bloom every couple years. So you'll see them one year and you go back to the same place where they are, and they're not blooming. They don't. Some of these flowers just do not bloom every year. But Sherburne is really good for the wild lupin. Crow-Hawson Park Reserve for the last 4 or 5 years has been planting the wild lupin in order, because this spring they're going to introduce some Karner blue butterflies into Crow-Hawson. And the caterpillar of that species of butterfly only feeds on the wild lupin. So sometime this spring they'll go to Wisconsin and capture about 500 butterflies and bring them to Crow-Hawson Park Reserve. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to photograph the Karner blue there. Now here's the showy one, and this is the one you see when you're going up the North Shore, in June usually. And it's not a native to Minnesota. It comes from the western U.S., but they're kind of the escapees from all of the gardens because they are really beautiful. And roadsides along the North Shore are, you hit that at the peak of bloom, and you see them from kind of like the Silver Creek Tunnel on up for a ways along the North Shore. The Calypso orchid is really a tiny orchid. It's only about 4 inches high. Lots of fun, really colorful with that yellow and purple going on. And you need to be in a coniferous forest of northern white cedar, balsam or balsam fir. And the Pennington bog is where I photograph them most often. But they're all elsewhere. And but if you want to photograph, if you want to go into Pennington bog, you need to get a permit to go in. So you have to call ahead, and it doesn't cost anything, but they just want to track who's going into the bog. And if you go into the bog, it's pretty big, and after a while, everything looks the same. It's carpet in most places, carpeted in sphagnum moss. And so I would recommend take a compass with you so that you know how to get out of the bog. Then our stemless lady slipper. Again, it's the May, June, July time frame for these guys. And, you know, Itasca State Park is where and Iron Springs, where I took these particular pictures. But Tetaguch also has it. And as you can see with the map, a lot of the northern parts of the state that has the right habitat, you'll find the stemless lady slipper. Then we have two yellow slippers. We have the greater and the small, and they look very much alike. There's a few things that you can distinguish them. The pouch on the greater is about 2 inches long, and that on the small is about 1 inch. Also, now the small is the one, the picture on the left, and you can see that the sepals are the 3 darker petals there are really twisted, and they're dark. And so you'll see that more on the small than you do on the large, which is the photograph on the right. J. Cook, Itasca again, Wild River. Really wet woods. They like a wet environment. Then, believe it or not, we have some prickly pear, some cactus that really have some pretty blooms. This is the Plains prickly pear. It's very similar to another one that's called the brittle prickly pear. The difference is the number of stickers it has on it. And but this one here, really in the southwest, along the granite rock outcrops for them, is where they like to grow. I think I've been to Blue Mound's, the Jeffers petroglyph, and for the Plains prickly pear, and then for the brittle, they're at Blue Valley and nice outcrops SNAs. The difference between the two, the flowers look very similar, but the difference is how big the pad is of the cactus. The one thing with those is that they're in a dry area usually, and they can be very dusty. So, if you happen to get some wetter conditions, that will help take some of the dust off. But I also, I usually have a brush of some kind with me and try to brush some of the dust off so that they photograph better, kind of beautify them. And then, of course, our showy lady slippers all along, the northern part of the states, down along the eastern side of the states. They don't bloom until they're quite an old plant, so they're like 50 to 60 years old for blooming. Moist prairies, some roadside ditches, I've been up to Saxon Bog on, I think it's 29 that runs east-west at the bottom of the bog. In the whole ditch was filled with showy lady slippers. Also, the Lady Slipper Highway up on CR 39 out of Black Duck, up along the northern edge of the state is, if you hit that right, they're just everywhere up there. Moving on through the year, June, July, out in the woods and fields, the Michigan lily, and it looks like a tiger lily. It's very similar, but the leaves are different than the tiger lily. And that's a lot of, some people will photograph a lily and call it a Michigan lily, but it's probably an escapee from a garden like the tiger lily. Three Rivers Park has them, Afton, St. Croix Park, lots of nice places to get those. You'll find these, I notice them most up on the North Shore, the oxeye daisy, because they're so showy and they're just everywhere up there. And they're right along the woods because they grow in disturbed soil. And they're an invasive, and again, another one that's escaped from gardens and is not a Minnesota native. All along the North Shore, you'll find those in June and August, between June and August, depending on what year it is. They do have quite a long blooming time, so if you're going up that way during that time, you probably run into them. And I didn't realize this until I saw these on the beach and couldn't figure out what they were and did some research. Beach pea, up along the lake shores, along Lake Superior, has beach peas. They're a lot of fun. Again, I did these in mid-July right on Lake Superior at Highway 61 and 14. So they're around, and they're very colorful and something different. Then the American white water lily, June through September, we see them a lot. Creeks Meadows has a lot. The Minnesota Arboretum has a lot. You see them in a lot of slow moving water or ponds, pretty much, as you look at the map, throughout a lot of the state. And then as we move on in toward the fall, we have a number of blazing stars. This one happens to be a prairie blazing star, and most of them bloom about this, relatively close range with each other. This one I took at Crowhausen Park, but I know they're at the Landscape Arboretum. They're Sherburne, Long Lake Regional Park, lots of places. They're on prairies and fields. Well, Indian pipe is interesting. It does not produce chlorophyll, and it lives on other plants via mycorrhizal fungi. And they're just these white ghosts out in the moist woods. I don't know if they come back the same every year at the same place, because I've gone back to where I've found them and could not find them. So I don't know if they're one that just, blooms once and then they're done, or something's changed. I don't know. But, you run across them. I run across them when I'm hiking, and it's always fun to see them. And then here's another non-native that we see a lot, and that's the eastern purple coneflower. We do have a native. It's called the narrow-leaved purple, but it's the eastern is really along the roadsides and edges of woods and fields and stuff, where the narrow-leaved is in the western sandy prairies, and the leaves are really different. And the petals, the purple petals, are fewer and they're not as wide, they're narrower. So, and then as we really moving into fall, we get the showy goldenrod and 18 other species of goldenrod across the state. Sherburne and Creeks Meadows are good places, but as you can see, they're scattered all over around prairies and savannas and fields, and yeah, they're around a lot. They're very showy. They're easy to find, and that's, I think I've talked about those things. Like I said, there's just a sampling of the ones I liked, and this is the website that I use this website a lot, and they run by donations. And so if you use this website, please give them a few bucks so that it continues, because it's just a font of information. You can, as you see up at the top, you can search by a plant name, and then there's an advanced search where you can say, oh, it has lanceolate leaves and it has a purple flower and it's tubular, and it'll bring up all of the flowers that match those keywords. And then something that's really nice to kind of get your feet wet, and when these wildflowers are blooming, is this what's blooming on the right side of the web page there, right below home. And it goes through by month and gives you a whole list of what wildflowers bloom in that month. And then you can follow them on Facebook, and there's their donation box. And this is when you drop down the menu for what's blooming, this is what you get. And it's April through October for native plants. They also have a separate box down here at the bottom of that red circle for the non-natives, which would be like the invasive lupin and those sorts of things. But you can see that they give you the name, and then in April it says that this particularly, the Western rock jasmine, can be found all 4 weeks of the month. And there's where I got the map. On each page there's a map, and there's just a real brief synopsis of where the plant grows, what its scientific name is, etc. And then notes, and then then it gives you, there's a number of photos, and they give you all, photos of the leaves, photos of the flower. If the seed pod is distinctive, it gives you a photo of that, so that when you can often identify where orchids are growing better in the fall after everything's kind of died back, because the leaves are so, on some of the species, are so distinctive. And you can walk through the woods and find the orchids pretty easily. Some of them, not all of them. Another resource that I use is from the DNR, and they have some information on the scientific and natural areas. And these are areas that have been set aside for conservation of either a specific flower, a specific grass, animal, whatever it is. And you can find those, by there you can see, you can find the SNAs by map, or if you know a name, you can look them up by that. And and I like to use them if I'm traveling around the state for other things. I do a lot of birding, and so I'll go to a certain county to say I want to bird that county, and I'll look at where all the SNAs are close, either coming or going. So, if it's the right time of year, I can stop and see what's there. And here's the map. There's a lot of them scattered all around. Most of them are open to visit. There's no trails or anything in them. They're not developed in any way. So there's a parking lot usually close by, and this website will give you directions to where you can park. A couple of them are closed. A number of them are also from the Nature Conservancy. There's some kind of sharing agreement between the DNR and the Nature Conservancy on some of them. I'm not really sure what that is, but I want to find out. And so this is what they give you for each of the SNAs. And recently, over the last number of years, they've standardized the plant checklist. You can see there in this red circle that they almost all of them now have a plant checklist, which was not true, in previous years. Good descriptions, how to get there, where to park, that sort of thing. So, and then the Minnesota Native Plant Society has programs and field trips, and I've done some of those, and that's really interesting to go to and learn about the plants. Field trips, of course, where to find them. And then last but not least, there's some of the Nature Conservancy's sites, and on the Nature Conservancy website, there's maps of where those are. A lot of them are open to the public, but as you can see on the map there on the lower right, there are some closed or that have limited access, depending on what they're trying to protect. So, Frenchman's Bluff there listed on the right side at the front. I go out to Blue Stem Prairie for prairie chicken photography. And then just north of Blue Stem is Frenchman's Bluff. And the last couple times I've been there, there's been just a large amount of prairie smoke. And so that's been fun. It's something to tie those two together in the early season. So that's it for me. I don't know if there's any questions or any other information you're interested in.
Well, I saw some flowers here that I didn't even hear before.
Oh, well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you go look at the Minnesota wildflower.info, and there's just a gazillion of them.
Mariann, thank you for your beautiful pictures and your expertise. It also seems like you get all around the state.
I do.
You get around.
When spring comes around, it's birds and flowers.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous.
Are there equivalent places in Wisconsin?
Oh, sure. And there's SNAs in Wisconsin as well. And there's Nature Conservancy sites in Wisconsin. It's just that, I'm in Minnesota. This is easy for me to get to. Like my Jewel Blazing Star, that was in Wisconsin. well, just across the river, but it was in Wisconsin. I've done other things in Wisconsin, well, Creeks Meadows and Fish Lake and things like that.
Mariann, that was an excellent presentation. I really learned a lot and inspired me to get out there because I didn't know anything about the wildflowers. And I'd seen them, but I didn't know what they were. So this was very, very helpful.
Good. And my favorite is the past flowers in spring. I guess because of, you're cooped up all winter, and they're really one of the very first ones that bloom that are really pretty. I have about 1,700 images of past flowers. That's my highest count for any flower. The next one is about 800 of the showy lady slipper, and then they go down from there. All right. Well,
Anything
thank
else?
you.
So Mariann, you're in charge. So as soon as you shut down,
I stopped
the rest
sharing.
of us. Okay. I will reclaim the host, and then I'm going to end the session. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Great
Thank
session.
you all.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.